When my daughter Briar looked me straight in the eye and said, "We'll travel without you this time, Dad." I smiled and nodded like I understood. What she didn't know was that I'd already discovered her real plan, and by the time their flight was supposed to take off, she'd learned that the man who'd been funding their dream vacations for 15 years still held all the cards. Sometimes the best lessons come with a price tag attached. My name is Stephen, I'm 61 years old, and I've spent the last 29 years building my specialty food import business here in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I import gourmet ingredients for high-end restaurants across the Southeast, and let me tell you, it's been a lucrative career. When you're the guy who supplies truffle oil to five-star establishments and rare spices to celebrity chefs, you develop both a substantial bank account and an appreciation for quality. More importantly, you learn to recognize when someone's trying to serve you something that's not what it appears to be. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to realize your own family sees you as nothing more than a walking ATM, stick around for this story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell, because what happened next is going to show you exactly why you should never underestimate a man who spent 3 decades building relationships with suppliers, distributors, and service providers across multiple industries. The conversation happened on a Tuesday evening in our living room here in our neighborhood, just outside downtown Fayetteville. Briar, my 28-year-old daughter, was sitting across from me with that entitled expression she'd been wearing more often lately. Her husband Jace was there too, nodding along like a bobblehead, and my ex-wife Tegan had this smug smile that I'd learned to recognize as trouble brewing. "Dad, we've been talking," Briar began, using that tone people use when they're about to deliver news they think you won't like. "This year's family vacation to Hawaii, we think it would be better if it was just us. You know, the younger generation. More fun, less complications. Complications. That's what they called me now. The guy who'd been writing checks for their family vacations for the past 15 years had somehow become a complication. I'd paid for trips to Disney World, Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, Myrtle Beach, and dozens of other destinations. Hotel suites, rental cars, restaurant bills, souvenirs, activities, everything. Last year alone, I'd dropped $12,000 on a week in the Outer Banks, and now I was a complication. "I see," I said calmly, taking a sip of my evening bourbon. "And how exactly are you planning to fund this Hawaii trip without complications?" That's when Jace jumped in, all puffed up with false confidence. "We've got it handled, Stephen. We're adults now. We can manage our own vacation." I almost laughed out loud. Jace worked part-time at a sporting goods store and spent his weekends playing video games. Briar had a decent job at a marketing firm, but I knew exactly how much she made because I'd helped her negotiate the salary 2 years ago. Between the two of them, they could maybe afford a long weekend at a budget motel, not a week in Hawaii. But here's what really got my attention that night. As they were explaining their grand plan to exclude me from the vacation I was expected to fund, I noticed Tegan kept checking her phone and smiling. Not the kind of smile you have when you're proud of your daughter's independence, the kind of smile you have when you know something others don't. That's when the pieces started falling into place. This wasn't about them wanting a young people's vacation. This was about something else entirely, something that involved my money but not my presence. And after 3 decades of reading people's motivations in business negotiations, I could smell a setup from a mile away. You see, when you spend your career dealing with restaurateurs who try to negotiate payment terms, distributors who attempt to shortchange shipments, and suppliers who promise quality they can't deliver, you develop a 6th sense for deception. Every instinct I'd honed over 29 years in business was telling me there was more to this story. So I did what any reasonable father would do. I smiled, told them I understood completely, and wished them a wonderful time. Then I excused myself, went to my home office, and started making some calls. Because if there's one thing I learned in the gourmet food import business, it's that the best ingredients are often hidden beneath the surface, and sometimes you have to dig a little deeper to find out what you're really dealing with. The next morning, I started my investigation the way I always approached business problems, methodically and quietly. First stop was my computer, where I logged into the family credit card account that I'd been paying off for years. You'd be amazed what you can learn about people's real intentions when you have access to their spending history. What I found made my blood run cold, but also confirmed every suspicion I'd developed the night before. Over the past 3 months, there had been charges I'd never seen before. A jewelry store in Charlotte, $850. A men's clothing store in Raleigh, $600. Multiple charges at upscale restaurants around the region, always for 2 people, never when I was around. But the real kicker was a charge from 2 weeks ago at a travel agency in downtown Fayetteville, $4,200 for what the description listed as premium travel package, Hawaii. They'd already booked the Hawaii trip. Not only that, they'd booked it 2 weeks before having the conversation with me about going without their complications. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision by young adults wanting independence. This was a calculated plan that had been in motion for months. But here's where it gets really interesting. The travel package wasn't for 3 people like I'd assumed. According to the detailed statement I pulled up, it was for 4 people: Briar, Jace, and 2 others. When I called the travel agency pretending to confirm details about the Fayetteville booking, the agent cheerfully told me it was for Mr. and Mrs. Morrison and Mr. and Mrs. Patterson. Patterson, that was Tegan's maiden name, the one she'd gone back to after our divorce. So my ex-wife wasn't just supporting this plan to exclude me, she was actively participating in the vacation I was funding. And the 4th person? Well, that took another phone call to figure out, but when you've been in business as long as I have, you learn how to ask the right questions. Turns out the mysterious Mr. Patterson was Derek, the guy Tegan had been seeing for the past 6 months. The same Derek who'd been showing up at family gatherings lately, always with some excuse about being in the neighborhood. The same Derek who worked at the bank where Tegan had recently moved her accounts. The same Derek who'd been driving the new pickup truck that somehow appeared in Tegan's driveway last month. So let me paint you the picture that was emerging. My daughter and son-in-law had conspired with my ex-wife and her boyfriend to plan a luxury vacation to Hawaii using my money, with the specific intention of excluding me so they could enjoy it as a cozy foursome. They'd been charging everything from date nights to new clothes on my credit card for months, building up to this grand finale where they'd jet off to paradise while I stayed home, wondering why my family didn't want me around anymore. The really twisted part? They'd planned to tell me about it the night before departure, giving me just enough time to feel hurt and excluded, but not enough time to do anything about it. Classic manipulation tactics. Make the victim feel grateful they're even being informed, while making it impossible for them to respond effectively. But here's what they didn't know about dear old Dad. When you've spent 3 decades importing specialty foods from suppliers around the world, you don't just learn about truffle oil and exotic spices. You learn about contracts, payment terms, cancellation policies, and how to protect yourself when someone tries to take advantage of your generosity. I spent the rest of that morning making phone calls. First to my attorney, Henderson Williams, who'd handled my business contracts for 20 years. Then to my banker, Patricia Chen, who'd managed my business and personal accounts since I started the company. Then to my accountant, Michael Thompson, who'd been doing my taxes and financial planning for over a decade. By lunchtime, I had a complete understanding of my legal and financial options. More importantly, I had a plan that would teach my ungrateful family exactly what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness and generosity for stupidity. The beauty of having spent 29 years building a successful business is that you accumulate not just money, but relationships. Relationships with people who understand that trust and respect are the foundation of any good partnership. People who know that when someone violates that trust, there have to be consequences. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I smiled genuinely for the first time since Tuesday night's conversation. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting even. And after 3 decades of negotiations, contracts, and business deals, I knew exactly how to get even with people who thought they could outsmart a man who'd built his fortune by always staying 3 steps ahead of everyone else. The discovery phase continued over the next few days, and what I found made the Hawaii situation look like amateur hour. These people hadn't just planned one vacation behind my back. They'd been systematically milking my financial support for months, treating my generosity like their personal slush fund. I started by going through 6 months of credit card statements, bank records, and automatic payments. The pattern was so obvious once I knew what to look for, I couldn't believe I'd missed it before. Every month, right after my automatic transfers went into Briar's checking account to help with her mortgage, there would be a flurry of charges that had nothing to do with house payments. The mortgage assistance I'd been providing, $1,500 a month for the past 3 years, because I wanted to help my daughter build equity in her first home here in Fayetteville. Except according to the bank records I pulled, her actual mortgage payment was only $1,100. Where was that extra $400 a month going? Designer purses, expensive dinners, weekend trips to Charlotte, and apparently funding her mother's new relationship with Derek. Then there were the emergency requests. Last spring, Breyer called me crying about needing $2,000 for car repairs after an accident. I wired the money immediately because that's what fathers do. Except when I called her insurance company to ask about the claim status, they had no record of any accident involving her vehicle. The $2,000 had gone straight into funding a romantic getaway weekend for Tegan and Derek in Asheville. The Christmas situation from 6 months ago really got under my skin. Breyer had asked for extra money to buy meaningful gifts for the family, talking about how she wanted to make the holiday special since it was Jace's first Christmas as part of our family. I'd given her $800, feeling proud that my daughter wanted to create beautiful memories for everyone. You know what I got for Christmas? A $20 coffee mug from the mall with "World's Greatest Dad" printed on it. Meanwhile, Derek, who I barely knew, unwrapped a $300 leather jacket that I'd apparently purchased for him without knowing it. Tegan got a jewelry set that cost more than my monthly car payment. And Jace received a gaming system that cost $600. But the real slap in the face was what I discovered about last year's family vacation to the Outer Banks. You remember the one that cost me $12,000? Well, it turns out that while I was paying for everyone's accommodations, meals, and activities, thinking we were creating precious family memories, Tegan and Derek were sneaking off for romantic beach walks and private dinners. The family photos from that trip suddenly made sense when I realized Derek wasn't just happening to be in the area. He'd been part of the vacation planning from the beginning. I'd been subsidizing my ex-wife's courtship with her new boyfriend, and they'd all been laughing about it behind my back. Every sunset dinner I thought was a nice family meal had been a double date, where I was the unwitting fifth wheel paying for everyone's drinks, while they enjoyed their little inside joke. The more I dug, the angrier I got. Not just angry, furious. For 3 years since the divorce, I'd been trying to maintain family unity for Breyer's sake. I'd swallowed my pride, tolerated Tegan's attitude, and continued supporting everyone financially because I thought we were all working toward keeping the family connected despite the changes. Instead, they'd been treating me like a mark in a long-term con game. Every family gathering, every holiday celebration, every emergency phone call had been part of an elaborate scheme to extract as much money as possible while giving me just enough attention to keep the checks coming. That Thursday evening, I sat in my home office looking at spreadsheets that told the whole story. Over the past 18 months, I'd provided over $43,000 in what I thought was family support. Mortgage assistance, car payments, insurance premiums, emergency funds, vacation expenses, holiday money, and dozens of smaller favors that added up to a small fortune. $43,000 to people who were actively conspiring to exclude me from the very experiences I was funding. $43,000 to a daughter who apparently saw me as nothing more than a convenient ATM. $43,000 to an ex-wife who was using my generosity to finance her new relationship. But you know what really pushed me over the edge? It wasn't the money, as much as that stung. It was the conversation I accidentally overheard Friday morning when Breyer thought I was still asleep. She was on the phone with someone, probably Tegan, talking about the Hawaii trip. "Don't worry about Dad," she said with a laugh that cut through me like a knife. "He'll be upset for a few days, but he always gets over it. And honestly, we'll have so much more fun without him there asking questions about every expense and trying to plan activities nobody wants to do." Then came the part that made my hands shake with rage. "Besides, if he gets too difficult about it, we can always play the guilt card. Remind him that we're his only family, and if he wants to see his future grandchildren, he'd better keep the money flowing." Future grandchildren. They were already planning to use children I didn't even know were coming as leverage to continue their financial manipulation. This wasn't just disrespect or taking advantage of my generosity. This was calculated emotional blackmail with a long-term strategy. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with ungrateful family members who needed a gentle lesson in appreciation. I was dealing with predators who had identified me as their primary source of funding and were prepared to use any means necessary to keep that funding flowing. Time for the specialty food import business expertise to kick in. Because if there's one thing you learn in my industry, it's that when suppliers try to cheat you, the response has to be immediate, decisive, and permanent. You don't negotiate with people who've already proven they can't be trusted. You cut them off and find better partners. That Friday afternoon, I implemented what I call the supplier audit approach. In my business, when you suspect a supplier is cheating you, You don't confront them directly and give them a chance to cover their tracks. You quietly gather all the evidence, consult with your legal and financial team, and then execute a plan that protects your interests while sending a clear message about consequences. My first call was to Henderson Williams, my attorney. "Henderson, I need to discuss some family financial issues that might require legal action," I told him. Within 2 hours, I was sitting in his office in downtown Fayetteville with a box full of bank statements, credit card bills, and documentation of every financial transaction I'd made on behalf of Breyer, Jace, and indirectly, Tegan. "Stephen, you've got a classic case of financial abuse," Henderson said, after reviewing everything. "Your daughter and ex-wife have been systematically defrauding you under the guise of family support. The good news is, since you've been documenting everything through your business accounting practices, you have ironclad evidence of the deception." He walked me through my options. Since Breyer was an authorized user on my credit card accounts, I could immediately revoke that authorization and dispute charges made without my knowledge. The mortgage assistance payments could be stopped instantly since they were voluntary transfers, not legal obligations. Most importantly, since they'd used my credit cards to book travel arrangements without my consent, I had grounds to report fraudulent charges and have the bookings canceled. "Here's what I recommend," Henderson continued. "We execute a coordinated financial protection plan, cancel all unauthorized access to your accounts, dispute fraudulent charges, and implement legal safeguards to prevent future abuse. But we do it all at once, on the day they're supposed to leave for Hawaii. Maximum impact, minimum opportunity for them to manipulate the situation." My next stop was Patricia Chen at First National Bank. Patricia had handled my business banking for decades and understood my financial situation better than anyone. "I need to restructure all my personal accounts," I told her. "Remove all authorized users, change all access codes, and create new accounts that only I control." Patricia nodded knowingly. She'd seen this situation before with other successful business clients. "We can have everything restructured by Monday morning," she said. "New account numbers, new access credentials, complete financial separation. I'll also set up fraud alerts on all your accounts to prevent any unauthorized attempts to access your funds." The third piece of the puzzle was Michael Thompson, my accountant. Michael had been tracking my family support expenses as potential tax deductions, so he had detailed records of every penny I'd spent. "The total comes to $67,000 over 3 years, he told me. "Between direct payments, credit card charges, and miscellaneous support, you've been providing approximately $22,000 annually in family assistance. Here's what's interesting from a legal standpoint," Michael continued. "Since they've been misrepresenting the purpose of these funds, you might have grounds to demand repayment. The mortgage assistance alone represents $18,000 in overpayments based on their actual housing costs. But I wasn't interested in trying to recover money from people who didn't have it. I was interested in making sure they understood that financial manipulation has consequences, and those consequences would be swift and absolute." The plan we developed was elegant in its simplicity. On Monday morning, the day before their scheduled departure to Hawaii, I would execute what we called Operation Financial Independence. Every credit card would be canceled, every automatic payment would be stopped, every account access would be revoked. Every financial connection between me and their spending habits would be severed permanently. The Hawaii trip, booked on my credit card without my knowledge, would be canceled due to fraudulent charges. The rental car reservations, the hotel bookings, the activity packages, all of it would disappear when the credit card company reversed the unauthorized transactions. But here's the beautiful part of the plan. I wasn't just cutting them off financially. I was doing it in a way that would expose their deception to everyone involved. When Derek showed up at the airport expecting to fly to Hawaii on my dime, he'd discover that his meal ticket had been canceled. When Tegan tried to play the victim about her daughter's disappointed vacation plans, she'd have to explain why she was part of a scheme to defraud her ex-husband. Henderson suggested one additional element that I loved. "We send them a formal letter, delivered by courier on Tuesday morning when they're supposed to be at the airport," he said. "A detailed breakdown of their fraudulent activities, copies of all the evidence we've collected, and a clear statement that all financial support is permanently terminated due to their breach of trust." That weekend, I felt a sense of anticipation I hadn't experienced since closing my first major restaurant contract 29 years ago. Not revenge exactly, but the satisfaction that comes from implementing a well-designed business strategy. When people violate the fundamental principles of trust and honesty, There have to be consequences that match the magnitude of their deception. I spent Sunday afternoon in my home office, not reviewing business contracts for once, but preparing for the most important negotiation of my personal life. The negotiation where I would demonstrate that treating me like a fool has a price tag attached, and that price tag was about to be paid in full. By Monday morning, I was ready to show my family exactly what happens when you mistake a successful businessman's kindness for weakness and his generosity for stupidity. Monday morning arrived like Christmas morning when I was a kid, except instead of unwrapping presents, I was unwrapping justice. By 8 a.m., I was sitting in Henderson's office with all the paperwork ready to execute Operation Financial Independence. Patricia from the bank was there too, along with Michael, my accountant, and we had everything coordinated down to the minute. First phase begins at 9 a.m. sharp, Henderson said, checking his watch. Patricia, you'll cancel all credit cards and freeze the accounts. Michael, you'll stop all automatic transfers. I'll handle the fraud disputes with the credit card companies and travel agencies. At exactly 9:02 a.m., I called American Express, Visa, and MasterCard to report fraudulent charges. The customer service representatives were incredibly helpful once I explained that my credit cards had been used to book travel arrangements without my authorization. Sir, we're showing charges totaling $4,200 for Hawaiian travel bookings made by unauthorized users, the Amex rep confirmed. We'll reverse these charges immediately and cancel the associated reservations. By 9:15, every credit card Breyer had access to was canceled. Every automatic payment I'd set up for her mortgage assistance was stopped. Every financial connection between my accounts and her spending habits was severed permanently. But here's where the specialty food import experience really paid off. In my business, timing is everything. You don't just cancel a supplier relationship, you make sure they understand exactly why it happened and what the consequences will be. So at 9:30, I implemented the communication phase of the plan. I called the travel agency in downtown Fayetteville. This is Stephen Morrison, I told them. I need to inform you that the Hawaiian travel package charged to my credit card without my authorization has been canceled due to fraud. The 4 people planning to travel tomorrow will need to make alternative arrangements. The agent was apologetic but clear. Mr. Morrison, once the credit card company reverses the charges, all reservations are automatically canceled. Hotel bookings, flight reservations, car rentals, activity packages, everything. There's no way to reinstate them without new payment methods. Perfect. Phase 1 was complete. At 10 a.m., I drove to Breyer's office at the marketing firm downtown. I wanted to see her face when she discovered that her credit cards weren't working anymore. Through the window, I watched her trying to swipe her card at the coffee shop next door, then pulling out her phone to call customer service with increasing frustration. The phone call was brief but enlightening. Even from across the street, I could see her expression change from confusion to panic to rage as she realized what had happened. She immediately called Tegan, then Jace, then probably Derek. 4 frantic phone calls in 10 minutes, all trying to figure out why their meal ticket had suddenly disappeared. At 11 a.m., my phone started ringing. First Breyer, then Tegan, then Jace calling over and over. I let every call go to voicemail. This wasn't a negotiation or a discussion. This was a consequence, and consequences don't require explanations to the people who earned them. The voicemails were exactly what I expected. Breyer crying about how I was ruining her life and destroying the family. Tegan demanding that I stop being vindictive and think about my daughter's happiness. Jace calling me unreasonable and threatening to make me regret this. But the most satisfying call came at noon from Derek, who apparently didn't realize I knew about his involvement. Mr. Morrison, there seems to be some confusion about tomorrow's travel arrangements, he said in his smoothest voice. I'm sure we can work this out like reasonable adults. Derek, I replied calmly, the only confusion is why you thought you could steal from me without consequences. Tomorrow you can explain to airport security why you're trying to board a plane with canceled tickets. By 1 p.m., Phase 2 was ready. Henderson arrived at my house with the courier service and a thick envelope containing copies of all their fraudulent activities, bank records, credit card statements, and a formal letter explaining that all financial support was permanently terminated due to breach of trust. The courier will deliver this to Breyer's house at 6 a.m. tomorrow, Henderson explained, right about the time they should be leaving for the airport. They'll understand exactly why they're not going to Hawaii, and they'll have documentation proving they brought this on themselves. That afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete peace of mind. After 3 decades of building a successful business by trusting people until they proved untrustworthy, I'd finally applied that same principle to my personal life. Tomorrow morning, my family would learn that financial manipulation has consequences, and those consequences are permanent. Tuesday morning at 5:30 a.m., I was already awake with my coffee, sitting in my kitchen and watching the sunrise through the window. At exactly 6 a.m., I saw the courier van pull into Briar's driveway 3 blocks away. I'd driven past her house on my way to get fresh biscuits from the local bakery, just to time everything perfectly. My phone started ringing at 6:17 a.m. Briar, screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Dad, what the hell is this letter? You canceled our vacation? You froze our accounts? Have you lost your mind?" "Good morning, Briar," I said calmly, buttering my biscuit. "I trust you received the documentation of your fraudulent activities. Everything's laid out clearly in the legal summary Henderson prepared." "Fraudulent? Dad, your family. You've always helped us with expenses. This is insane." "Family doesn't steal from family," I replied. "Family doesn't lie about emergencies to fund romantic getaways. Family doesn't book vacations on someone else's credit card and then exclude them from the trip they're paying for." The silence on the other end told me she was reading through the evidence we'd compiled. Bank records showing the mortgage overpayments, credit card statements highlighting the unauthorized charges, documentation of every lie she'd told to extract money from me over the past 18 months. At 6:45, Tegan called, and her tone was completely different. Not angry like Briar, but calculating. She was trying to figure out how to manipulate the situation to her advantage. "Stephen, I think there's been a misunderstanding," she began in that fake sweet voice I remembered from our marriage. "The kids were just trying to plan a nice family vacation. Maybe we can discuss this like adults." "We are discussing it like adults," I said. "Adults who document financial fraud and respond with legal consequences. Check your bank account, Tegan. All those transfers I've been making for Briar's mortgage assistance are permanently stopped. You can't just cut off your daughter because of a misunderstanding about vacation planning. Watch me." The third call came from Jace at 7:15, and this one was pure desperation. "Mr. Morrison, please, we're supposed to fly out this morning. Our bags are packed. The airport shuttle is coming in an hour. Can't we work this out?" "Jace, let me explain something about business relationships," I said, walking out to my back deck to enjoy the morning air. "When someone violates your trust systematically for months, there's no working it out. There's only consequences and lessons learned. But we'll miss our flight. The hotel reservations, everything. You should have thought about that before you decided to commit credit card fraud." At 8 a.m., Henderson called to confirm that all the financial protections were in place and functioning perfectly. "The credit card companies have reversed all unauthorized charges," he reported. "The travel agency confirmed that all reservations are canceled permanently. Your accounts are secured with new passwords and access codes. Any word from their end about trying to recover the bookings?" Tegan called our office at 7:30 trying to negotiate. I explained that fraud isn't negotiable and referred her to the criminal law section of the State Bar Association. By 8:30, I was getting text messages from all of them, increasingly frantic as their departure time approached. Photos of their packed suitcases, screenshots of their canceled flight confirmations, desperate pleas about family unity and forgiveness. But the message that really caught my attention came from Derek at 9:15. "Mr. Morrison, I'm at the airport with your family. The airline says our tickets are canceled due to payment issues. Surely we can resolve this misunderstanding." I called him back immediately. "Derek, there's no misunderstanding. You're at the airport because you thought you were taking a vacation funded by money you helped steal from me. Consider this your introduction to the consequences of fraud." "This is ridiculous. I barely even know you." "Exactly. You barely know me, but you were perfectly comfortable spending my money on your girlfriend and her family. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." At 10 a.m., Briar showed up at my house, still in her travel clothes, dragging her suitcase behind her. Her face was red from crying, and she looked like she hadn't slept. "Dad, please," she begged, standing on my front porch. "We made a mistake. We should have included you in the vacation planning. But canceling everything? Cutting off all our support? This is cruel." I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised and supported and loved, who'd spent months systematically stealing from me while planning to exclude me from the experiences I was funding. "Briar," I said quietly, Cruelty is lying to your father for 18 months. Cruelty is using fake emergencies to fund your mother's love life. Cruelty is booking a vacation on someone else's credit card and then telling them they're not invited. We were going to pay you back. With what money? Your part-time husband's sporting goods store salary? She started crying again, but these weren't the manipulative tears I'd seen before. These were the tears of someone who'd finally realized that actions have consequences, and those consequences don't disappear just because you're sorry you got caught. What do you want from us? She asked. I don't want anything from you anymore, I replied. That's the point. At 10:30, I closed the door and went back to my coffee. Outside, I could hear Briar calling Tegan, probably planning their next strategy for getting their funding source back online, but I was done being anyone's funding source. After 29 years in business, I'd finally applied my professional standards to my personal relationships. The rest of Tuesday was like watching a masterclass in consequences unfold in real time. By noon, I was getting calls from people I hadn't heard from in months, all trying to mediate the situation. Apparently, Briar and Tegan had launched a full-scale campaign to paint me as the unreasonable villain who'd destroyed the family over money. First was my sister Rachel from Charlotte, who'd obviously gotten a very one-sided version of events. Stephen, honey, Briar called me crying about how you canceled their vacation. Don't you think you're being a little harsh? Rachel, did she mention the $43,000 they've stolen from me over the past 18 months? Silence. What, $43,000? I spent 20 minutes walking Rachel through the evidence, the fake emergencies, the mortgage overpayments, the unauthorized credit card charges, the systematic deception. By the end of the conversation, Rachel's tone had completely changed. My God, Stephen, I had no idea. She made it sound like you just got angry about vacation planning. That's what manipulators do. They control the narrative to avoid accountability. Next came Pastor Williams from our church, where Briar had apparently gone to seek support and sympathy. Brother Morrison, I understand there's been some family difficulties. Perhaps we could sit down and work through this with Christian forgiveness. Pastor, forgiveness doesn't mean enabling theft, I replied. Even Jesus threw the money changers out of the temple. The most interesting call came at 2 p.m. from Derek's boss at the bank. Apparently, Derek had called in sick to work, claiming a family emergency prevented him from traveling. But when his supervisor heard rumors around town about Derek being involved in some kind of fraud situation, he got nervous. Mr. Morrison, I hope you don't mind me calling, but Derek Patterson works in our loan department, and if there are any allegations of financial impropriety, we need to investigate immediately. I assured him I had no intention of involving Derek's employer in a personal matter, but I could hear the concern in his voice. In a town like Fayetteville, reputation matters, and Derek's reputation had just taken a serious hit. At 4 p.m., Jace showed up at my house, and this conversation was different from the morning's tearful pleas. This was a man trying to salvage his marriage by fixing the financial crisis his wife had created. Mr. Morrison, I know this looks bad, he began, but I think there were just some miscommunications about the vacation expenses. Jace, sit down, I said, gesturing to my porch chairs. Let me explain something about business that might help you in your marriage. When someone lies to you repeatedly, steals from you systematically, and shows no remorse until they get caught, that's not miscommunication. That's fraud. I pulled out the folder Henderson had prepared with copies of all the evidence. Your wife has been running a long-term con game against her own father. Look at these bank statements. Look at these credit card bills. This isn't confusion about vacation planning. This is calculated theft. Jace went pale as he reviewed the documentation. I didn't know about most of this, he said quietly. That's because she didn't tell you. Just like she didn't tell me the truth about what the money was for. What do you want us to do? I want you to understand that my relationship with Briar is permanently changed. I will never again provide financial support, emergency funds, or assistance of any kind. If you two want to build a life together, you'll do it with your own resources. And if we can't, then you'll learn to live within your means, like every other adult in America. By 6 p.m., the phone calls had stopped and an unusual quiet settled over my house. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about the next emergency call asking for money. I wasn't wondering if I was being manipulated or taken advantage of. I wasn't calculating how much family support I could afford this month. I made myself a bourbon and sat on my back deck, watching the sun set over Fayetteville. Tomorrow, Briar and Jace would wake up in their house with a mortgage they couldn't afford, credit cards they couldn't use, and no family financial safety net. Tegan would have to explain to Derek why their romantic vacation had been canceled due to fraud charges, and all of them would have to face the reality that their meal ticket was permanently revoked. The specialty food import business had taught me that when you're dealing with dishonest suppliers, the only solution is complete separation. You can't partially trust someone who's already proven they'll cheat you. You cut them off entirely and find better business partners. Tonight, I'd applied that same principle to my family relationships, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace with my decisions. The phone rang one more time at 8 p.m. Briar, probably making one last attempt to restore her funding source. I let it go to voicemail. Some relationships are too damaged to repair, and some trust is too broken to rebuild. Tomorrow would be the first day of my new life, free from financial manipulation and family fraud. Wednesday morning brought the moment I'd been waiting for since this whole mess started. The moment when entitled people who've been living beyond their means finally face reality. And reality, as they were about to discover, doesn't care about your vacation plans or your lifestyle expectations. At 8:15 a.m., my phone rang. Briar, and this time her voice was different. Not crying, not angry, just desperate. Dad, we can't make our mortgage payment. The automatic transfer didn't go through and we don't have enough in our account. That's correct, I replied, sipping my morning coffee. The automatic transfer was canceled Monday morning along with all your other unauthorized access to my accounts. But Dad, what are we supposed to do? The payment is due today. The same thing every other adult does when they can't afford their mortgage. Figure it out or face the consequences. You can't be serious. You're going to let us lose our house? Briar, let me be very clear about something. I'm not letting you lose anything. You lost your financial support when you decided to commit fraud against the person providing it. This is what consequences look like. The second call came an hour later from Tegan, and her tone was pure venom. Stephen, you've made your point. Now stop being vindictive and help your daughter before she loses her home. Tegan, my daughter lost my help when she started stealing from me. If you're so concerned about her housing situation, maybe Derek can help out with that bank salary of his. Derek and I aren't responsible for your family obligations. Neither am I anymore. You three adults created this situation together. You can solve it together. At 10 a.m., Henderson called with an update that made my morning even brighter. Stephen, we've received a call from an attorney representing your daughter. Apparently, she's exploring legal options to force you to continue financial support. I laughed out loud. She wants to sue me for the right to steal from me? That's essentially what her lawyer told my secretary, yes. I explained that financial support between adult family members is voluntary, not legally mandated, and that documented fraud actually supports your position, not hers. What did they say to that? The lawyer hung up pretty quickly once I mentioned we have 18 months of documented evidence showing systematic deception and unauthorized credit card usage. By noon, the entertainment really began. I drove downtown to run some errands and stopped by the bank where Patricia worked. She pulled me aside with a grin that told me she had news. Your ex-wife and her boyfriend were here this morning, Patricia said quietly. They tried to open a joint account and apply for a credit card using Derek's employment at First National as collateral for their application. How'd that work out for them? Well, when Derek's supervisor heard he was applying for personal credit while involved in some kind of family financial dispute, they decided to review his employment status. Turns out, having your name associated with fraud allegations isn't great for a banking career. The afternoon brought my favorite call of the entire week. Derek, calling me personally, and his voice was shaking with barely controlled rage. Morrison, I don't know what kind of lies you've been spreading, but my job is in jeopardy because of your vindictive behavior. Derek, I haven't spoken to anyone at your bank. Your employment problems are the direct result of your decision to participate in fraudulent activities against me. I never committed any fraud. You participated in booking and planning a vacation using stolen credit card access with the specific intent of excluding the person whose money you were spending. In legal terms, that's called conspiracy to commit fraud. This is insane. I barely even know you. Exactly my point. You don't know me well enough to steal from me, yet here we are. At 3 p.m., I got the call I'd been expecting since Monday. Briar, completely broken down, ready to admit the truth about everything. "Dad, please," she sobbed. "I know what we did was wrong. I know we lied to you and took advantage of your generosity. But please don't let us lose everything because of our mistakes." "Briar, tell me the truth about something. When you planned that Hawaii vacation, were you ever going to invite me?" Long pause. "No." "When you asked for emergency money for car repairs, was there ever actually an accident?" "No." "When you told me you needed extra mortgage assistance, did you tell me the real amount of your monthly payment?" "No." "So for 18 months you've been lying to me, stealing from me, and planning to exclude me from the experiences I was funding. And now that there are consequences for those choices, you want me to rescue you from those consequences." "Yes," she whispered. "I'm sorry, Dad. We're all sorry." "Briar, sorry doesn't unbreak trust. Sorry doesn't undo 18 months of systematic theft. Sorry doesn't change the fact that you saw me as nothing more than a source of money to fund your lifestyle. What can we do to fix this?" "Nothing. You can't fix this. The relationship we had before was based on lies and manipulation. I'm not going back to that." "So that's it? You're just going to cut us off forever?" "I'm going to live my life without worrying about being stolen from by my own family. If you want to interpret that as being cut off, that's your choice." That evening, I made myself a celebratory dinner: grilled steak, roasted vegetables, a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. Because today was special. Today was the day I stopped being a victim of family financial abuse and started being a man who demands respect from everyone, including his relatives. The phone rang twice during dinner. I didn't answer. Some conversations are finished, even when the other person doesn't realize it yet. The following weeks revealed just how deep the financial hole they'd dug really was. Without my monthly subsidies, the house of cards they'd built started collapsing faster than I'd even anticipated. And frankly, watching it happen was more satisfying than I'd expected. 2 weeks after the canceled Hawaii trip, Briar and Jace put their house on the market. Turns out, when you can't afford an $1,100 mortgage payment on your combined income, you definitely can't afford the insurance, property taxes, and maintenance that come with home ownership. The realtor's sign went up on a Thursday, and by Saturday, half the neighborhood knew they were in financial trouble. The most delicious part? They had to sell at a loss because they'd taken out a second mortgage last year to pay for what Briar told me were necessary home improvements. Except, according to the real estate listing, those improvements were a hot tub, a media room, and landscaping that cost more than most people make in 6 months. Improvements they'd financed with my mortgage assistance money while lying about their actual housing costs. Tegan's situation was even more entertaining. Derek's banking career didn't survive the fraud allegations, even though I never filed formal charges. Apparently, having your name associated with financial impropriety is a career killer in banking, regardless of whether you're actually prosecuted. He found work at a used car lot, making about 40% of his previous salary. Without Derek's bank salary and without access to my credit cards, Tegan had to move out of her upscale apartment downtown and into a one-bedroom place on the outskirts of town. The woman who'd been living like a queen on my daughter's stolen money was suddenly clipping coupons and shopping at discount stores. 3 weeks after the Hawaii debacle, I ran into Jace at the grocery store. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in a month, and when he saw me, he actually tried to duck behind the cereal aisle. But I caught up with him near the checkout line. "How's married life treating you, Jace?" I asked pleasantly. "It's challenging," he admitted, looking at his cart full of generic brands and marked-down produce. "Briar's having trouble adjusting to our new budget." "What new budget?" "Well, without the help you were providing, we had to cut our spending by about 60%. No more restaurants, no more shopping trips, no more weekend getaways. Briar's working 2 jobs now just to make ends meet." 2 jobs. The daughter who'd been treating me like her personal ATM was suddenly discovering what most Americans already know. If you want money, you have to work for it. "How's she handling that?" I asked. "Not well," Jace said quietly. "She keeps talking about how this is all temporary, how you'll come around eventually, and things will go back to normal." "Things will never go back to normal, Jace. Normal was me being stolen from while you all laughed behind my back. I'm not going back to that." A month after the canceled trip, I received a letter in the mail that almost made me choke on my morning coffee. It was from Briar, but not the usual begging for money. This was different. This was a formal notification that she was pregnant and that I was going to be a grandfather. At the bottom of the letter, in handwriting I recognized as Tegan's, was a note. Surely you won't let your grandchild suffer because of adult disagreements. Family is forever, and this baby will need his grandfather's support. I called Henderson immediately. They're trying to use a pregnancy as emotional blackmail to restore their funding, I told him. Stephen, even if she is pregnant, that doesn't create any legal obligation for you to provide financial support. Grandparents have no legal responsibility to fund their children's families, regardless of circumstances. But the pregnancy letter did accomplish one thing. It confirmed that they still saw me as nothing more than a source of money. They weren't trying to rebuild our relationship or apologize for the betrayal. They were looking for new leverage to restart their financial scam. That afternoon, I wrote my own letter back. Short and to the point. Congratulations on your pregnancy. Your child will have two parents who can provide for him or her through their own hard work, just like every other family in America. I wish you all the best in your new life of financial independence. 6 weeks after Hawaii, I was having lunch at my favorite restaurant downtown when the waitress mentioned that the table near the window had specifically requested not to be seated in my section. I looked over and saw Briar, Jace, Tegan, and Derek having what appeared to be a very tense family meeting over discount menu items. They saw me too, and the look that passed between them was priceless. Not anger anymore, but something much more satisfying. Recognition that their actions had permanent consequences, and those consequences weren't going away just because they wanted them to. After lunch, I stopped by Henderson's office to update my will and estate planning documents. I want to make sure my assets are protected from any future manipulation attempts, I told him. If they're willing to commit fraud when I'm alive and supporting them, I can only imagine what they'd do when I'm gone. Henderson nodded. We'll structure everything to prevent any challenges or claims from family members who've demonstrated financial misconduct. That evening, sitting on my back deck with a bourbon and watching another beautiful North Carolina sunset, I realized something important. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about money, not because I had more of it, but because I wasn't constantly hemorrhaging it to people who didn't appreciate it. My bank account was growing instead of shrinking. My stress levels were lower than they'd been in years. And most importantly, I was finally living my life for myself, not as a funding source for ungrateful relatives. The specialty food import business had taught me to cut ties with dishonest suppliers. Applying that principle to family relationships had been the best business decision I'd ever made.